Hi. So yesterday we talked about um, if I want to compare two sides, then I would do, this side over this side, and I'd get a fraction answer. Sorry, airplane. I'd get a fraction answer, and then I could simplify it further to get a decimal, right? All right. So today we're going to talk about what if we don't know the measure of an angle, but we are given two sides. So we are given, let me do pen, two sides, right? And we need to find the angle measurement. So you need to use the inverse function on your calculator. You need a scientific calculator. I know that you guys have iPhones, so what you could do is you could use your calculator on your iPhone or your whatever phone, Android or whatever you have. And so it's a scientific calculator, so you the inverse, because the inverse tells you the angle measure. Okay, so here we go. To find the acute angles when you know two sides requires the inverse trig function. Inverse of sine, inverse of cosine, inverse of tangent. Recall what this notation means and what it does not mean. It does not mean the reciprocal. Okay, I'm not flipping the fraction over. I'm not finding the opposite or anything like that. But it is finding the angle that has a particular sine, cosine, or tangent ratio. Whenever you use one of these functions on a calculator, the answer given is the angle that has sine, cosine, or tangent. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a couple from your homework. Your homework page has 13 questions. Okay? So let's do a couple from the top. All right. Okay. I am going to be given two sides. The sides that I am given and my unknown angle. I want to remind you that this means theta. Okay? So the angle that I don't know, think of it as like x, unknown. I don't know how big it is. But I do know that there are two sides, and the two sides relate to this angle because one of the sides is adjacent to it, and one of the sides is the triangle's hypotenuse. So that means I've got an adjacent and hypotenuse. Which trig function has adjacent and hypotenuse in it? Did you say cosine? Okay, so here's how this works. I'm going to do cosine of, I don't know how big the angle is, equals adjacent over hypotenuse. Okay, 12 over 13. So now that means that I'm going to do my calculator. My calculator might be different than yours. Okay, obviously mine's old. It probably is. So what I have to do is, in my calculator, I first have to do 12 divided by 13, and I get that. Then I need to do my cosine inverse button, which is this orange. So I need to go shift cosine. And there is my answer, 22.6. You might have a calculator where you first press shift cosine and then you enter the fraction. You have to play around. So why don't you play around with your calculator right now and figure out how the fraction 12 over 13 cosine inverse makes 22.6. So make sure that you've got the pattern of how your calculator works, like solid, so that you're confident in it. Okay? So that's what you're going to have to do. Your job is to figure out, hey, how are these two sides related to the angle that I have? So this angle unknown has a opposite side and it has a, right next to it, adjacent side. What trig function has an opposite and an adjacent, or an adjacent and an opposite? I hope you said tangent. Tangent is opposite over adjacent. 4 over 13. So that means that I'm going, in my calculator, 4 divided by 13 is that. Shift tangent. And this is the degrees. I forgot to put degrees in the other one. That means how big my angle is. Okay? All right. Now we're going on to number 9. Because I figure you're probably fine with 1 through 8 with those 2 examples I gave you. Next, I am told how big the angle is and I need to find a missing side. So here we go. I'm going to do, well, this angle is 37. What are the 2 sides that I'm given? I am given the hypotenuse and I am given, that's not the opposite side, that's the adjacent side. So I'm given adjacent and hypotenuse. What trig function has adjacent and hypotenuse in it? Well, you'll see that it is cosine. So here's how this works. I know that the angle measurement is 37. Up here, I didn't know the angle, so I put cosine theta. But since I know the angle, I'm going to put cosine 37 equals adjacent over hypotenuse. Adjacent is 11. Hypotenuse is I don't know. So now I'm actually solving for something. I'm solving for x. Now, I don't know if you recall. I will remind you if you don't. But the shortcut way to solve for x is to just, because the x is on the denominator, is to switch the position of the x in the cosine 37. You could multiply both sides by x and then divide by cosine 37. But that would still leave you with 11 in the numerator and cosine 37 in the denominator. Okay, so now, here's what we got. I have to divide these to get how big is this hypotenuse. Now remember, the hypotenuse is the longest side in the triangle. So the answer better be bigger than 11. It has to be. Okay, so here we go. My calculator, this is how it works. I do, here we go. 11 divided by, and I have to press 37 cosine, not inverse of cosine, equals 13.7. So the side is 13.7 units long. Okay, and that's how you would do 10, 11, and 12. In the answer key tomorrow that I post, I'm going to have all the worked out, like all this on the answer key so that you'll be able to solve it without, or see my work, you know what I mean? All right, guys, excellent. This is the 3rd day of trig. We move on to something new tomorrow. Have a great day, guys.